What Amish husbands do to wives who say no to another child. I said no after the seventh. The room smells of cooled lamp oil and the cotton sheet I've washed too many times. It is 2 in the morning. The lantern is out. Moonlight cuts a pale line across the foot of our bed, and my husband's breathing is slow, even, untroubled. The breathing of a man who believes nothing has changed. My hand rests on my stomach, flat for now. 7 times it has not been flat. I am 40 years old, and tonight, in our own bedroom, I said a word an Amish wife is not supposed to say. One small word. Nay. I'm Mary, and this is Quiet Plain Voices, a place where women like me speak the things we were taught to swallow. If anywhere in your own life you've lived inside a silence that wasn't peace, subscribe and stay with me. And tell me in the comments, what was the first no you ever said out loud? I have not moved in 20 minutes. I am afraid that if I shift my weight, he will know I am awake, and the silence between us will have to become words. And I am not ready for words. So I lie here. I count the beams in the ceiling, the way I counted them on our wedding night 22 years ago. 6 beams. Same house, same beams. A different woman underneath them. I said no tonight, and now I am waiting to see what morning brings. I do not know yet. That is the part no one prepares you for. My name is Mary. I am 40. I live in a settlement in Lancaster County, in a white farmhouse my husband's grandfather built. We have 7 children. The oldest is 19. Already married, already carrying her first. The youngest is 2, asleep down the hall in a crib my husband made the winter I almost died. 22 years of marriage, 7 births, 3 miscarriages no one ever spoke of because we do not speak of those. My womb has held 10 lives. It is tired. But in our world, tiredness is not a reason. Tiredness is not allowed to be a reason. You have to understand the Ordnung to understand the weight of what I did tonight. The Ordnung is not a written rule book you can open and read. It is the air in every plain home, the unspoken understanding of how we live, how we dress, how we obey, how we yield. We have a word for that yielding: Gelassenheit, surrender, a quiet bending of the self toward God, toward husband, toward community. A woman's body is part of that surrender. Birth control is never named outright. It does not need to be. It simply is not done. Children are God's will. And a wife who interferes with that will is interfering with God himself. I was 19 the day I married Eli. The morning of the wedding, my mother sat on the edge of my bed and brushed my hair the way she did when I was a girl. She did not look at me when she finally spoke. She said, "Whatever he asks of you, give it. Do not ask questions." Then she kissed the crown of my head and stood up and walked out, and that was the only marriage advice I ever received. I have carried those 2 sentences for 22 years. They have lived inside me like a second spine. Tonight, for the first time, I felt them crack. The first baby came when I was 20. Joy. Pure, simple joy. The second at 22. Pride. The third at 24. The first whisper of tiredness I did not name. The fourth at 26. My body becoming a country I did not recognize. The fifth at 29. And afterward, a darkness I had no word for. A heaviness that sat on my chest for 9 months while I nursed and cooked and smiled. The 6th at 33. The Mennonite midwife held my wrist for a long moment after that birth and said softly, "Mary, your body needs rest." I nodded. But in our world, rest is a word for the dead. There is a woman I should tell you about. Her name is Sarah. She is my cousin, 4 years older, and she has 9 children. 3 years ago, on a cold afternoon in her kitchen, she pressed a warm mug into my hands and said something I did not understand at the time. She said, "Mary, the day you ever say no, you will see the truth of your marriage. And that truth will either break you or set you free. There is no middle ground." I laughed. I told her I would never need to know. She did not laugh back. She looked at me for a long moment, then turned to her stove. I am thinking about her face tonight. I did not understand it then. I understand it now. The 7th pregnancy nearly killed me. My blood pressure climbed week by week. The midwife brought a doctor from town, a Mennonite man with kind eyes, and he told my husband, gently but plainly, that another pregnancy after this one could end my life. Eli listened. He nodded. He said, "We will trust God." The baby came in an emergency, 2 months early, in a rush of fear and prayer and a stain on the bedsheet I will never forget. There was a night in the hospital when I could not feel my hands, and I thought, very calmly, I am going to die in this bed, and my baby will not know my voice. I lived. The baby lived. But something in me did not come home. 8 weeks after the birth, on a Tuesday in October, my husband reached for me in the dark. His hand was warm and familiar and not unkind. He is not an unkind man. I want you to hear that. Eli is not a cruel husband. He is a product of every father and grandfather before him, of every sermon in High German, of every wedding where a mother whispered the same 2 sentences mine had. My heart began to pound. My hands went cold. And from somewhere deep in my chest, from a place I did not know existed, one small word climbed up my throat and out into the dark. Nay. He froze. He did not speak. He did not ask. After a long moment, he turned away from me, and the silence that filled the room was not the silence of an Amish house at rest. It was a silence with a question inside it. A question he would not ask, and I could not answer. I thought he might forget by morning. I thought I might too. But 3 days later, I learned what Amish husbands do to wives who say no. Not with shouts, not with hands. Something else. Something quieter. And that something was the silence itself. I did not understand at first that the silence was the punishment. I thought he was thinking. I thought he was praying. I thought, by Friday, he would reach for my hand at breakfast and we would go on. But silence, in our world, is a tool men are taught to use the way other men are taught to use their fists. It does not leave a mark on the skin. It leaves a mark somewhere deeper. And Eli, who had never once in 22 years refused to speak to me, became a man I lived beside without living with. The first morning, he did not say good morning. The second morning, he did not say thank you when I set his coffee down. By the third morning, I had made him scrapple and eggs the way he likes them, the yolks just barely set, 2 slices of bread on the side. I placed the plate in front of him. He ate in silence. He stood. He walked out. No nod, no glance, no thank you. 22 years of marriage, and that was the first morning he had ever left the table without thanking me. I stood at the sink with my hands in the water, and I understood very slowly that I was being taught a lesson without a single word being spoken. 10 days into the silence, the bishop's wife came to call. She arrived on a Tuesday afternoon with a jar of apple butter and a bright, careful smile. We sat at my kitchen table. We drank coffee. She asked about the children. She asked about my mother's health. And then, in the gentle way our women have perfected over generations, she said, "Mary, is everything well in your home?" Eli seemed troubled at service on Sunday. I held my cup tighter. I said everything was fine. She smiled and patted my hand and said she was glad. But I knew. My husband had not gone to the bishop directly. We do not do things directly. But he had let something show, and the message had been sent through the long, quiet network of our women, and now it had arrived at my kitchen table in the shape of apple butter. That afternoon, after she left, I walked out to the garden. It was late September. The tomatoes were heavy on the vines, low and red and almost too ripe. I knelt in the dirt without an apron, and I let my hands push into the soil. The earth was cool. A monarch butterfly settled on the wooden stake beside me and stayed for a long time, opening and closing its wings. I did not cry. I simply breathed. I had not breathed, I realized, in 10 days. The garden did not ask anything of me. The garden did not need me to say yes. For a few quiet minutes, I sat there with the butterfly, and I was a woman again, not a womb. That night, I thought of Sarah. I walked the 2 miles to her farm the next morning, and we sat on her porch with cold coffee neither of us drank. I told her everything. She did not look surprised. She told me her own story then, in pieces, the way she had never told me before. After her 8th, she had said no. Her husband had moved into the spare room for 6 months. The bishop had come, not once but 3 times. The women had stopped sitting beside her at quilting frolics. The whispers were soft and constant, like wind through wheat. And after 6 months, Sarah said, she had been so tired of being alone inside her own marriage that she had simply nodded the next time he reached for her. The 9th child came the following autumn. Sarah is 44. She looks 60. The light that used to live in her eyes is gone, and I do not know where it went. Sitting on her porch, I understood something I had been refusing to see. This was not Eli. This was not Sarah's husband. This was not one cruel man in one cruel marriage. This was the shape of every marriage we had been raised inside. The men were taught that a wife's no was a spiritual failure, not theirs but ours. The women were taught that yielding was holy, and the silence, the bishop's wife, the apple butter, the cold side of the bed, all of it was a system older than any of us. A system that ground down women like Sarah and women like me, and ground down our husbands too, in a different way, into men who did not know how to ask, only how to expect. The community had given me beautiful things: belonging, faith, children with safe, clean childhoods, the hymns of the Ausbund in candlelight. Both things are true. The beauty is true, and so is what it took from me. If you have ever lived inside a home where your no did not register as a word, where it was treated as a sickness to be cured, a mood to be waited out, a small rebellion to be quietly corrected, then this story is not only mine, it belongs to you too. If you want more of these voices, the ones we were taught not to use, stay with me on this channel. And if there is a woman in your life, your mother, your sister, your friend, who lives inside that kind of quiet, leave her name in the comments, not for the world to see, but for me to pray over tonight. 6 weeks into the silence, Eli finally spoke. We were standing in the barn. He was mending a halter, and I had brought him water. He did not look up. He said, very quietly, "I thought you understood that this was our duty." His voice was not angry. It was tired. It was the voice of a man who had also been carrying something heavy for 22 years and had never been allowed to name it. I set the water down. For the first time in our marriage, I looked him full in the eye and I said, "Eli, I understand, but my body cannot carry that duty anymore. And if God gave me this body, perhaps it is also His will that I keep it alive." He did not answer. He looked back down at the halter. But the silence that came after was not the same silence. Something inside it had moved. That night, I stood at the kitchen window after everyone had gone to bed. The moon was high. The fields were silver. I pressed my palm against the cold glass, and I understood that the punishment had not been the silence. The punishment, the real, frightening, beautiful punishment, had been hearing my own voice for the first time in 22 years. I had been a wife at 19 and a mother at 20, and somewhere along the way, between the babies and the bread and the bending, the woman called Mary had gone quiet inside me. Nay had been her first word back. A small word, a new language. One I would have to learn slowly, syllable by syllable, for the rest of my life. It has been 14 months. There is no 8th child. My marriage is not whole, but it is breathing. Eli and I speak. We do not always understand each other, but we no longer pretend. My 17-year-old daughter watches me sometimes from across the kitchen, and I see her studying my face the way I once studied my own mother's, looking for the map. I pray every night that she will learn the word nay earlier than I did, that her first language as a wife will not be yielding, that her body will belong to her before it belongs to anyone else. Tonight I am sitting at this same kitchen table and I am looking at my hands. They have rolled out bread dough for 22 years. They have caught babies. They have folded prayer caps and patched trousers and held the hands of the dying. They are older than I remember them being. For the first time in my life, when I look at them, I do not see my mother's hands, or my husband's wife's hands, or the 7 children's mother's hands. I see my own. And I think that may be the only thing a woman truly owns in this life. The moment she looks down and finally recognizes her own hands as her own.